So I'm going to be talking about The Lost and Found, and I want to say this book was a great read. I would recommend this. There's a lot of strong influences. There's a the writer is a is a neurologist, right? And there's strong depiction in neurology on the aspect of self-identifying who we are. So putting like a biological process and innate behavior in the significance and meaning in our in innate reactions that we have. The book helps annotate the implication of living your life in a manner where you kind of feel proud of yourself when you look back and see these things, because our identity is going to come in line with a lot of our philosophy, our personalities, our memories, and a sense of who you are, along with our ego, right? And there are people who have a very weak association with that just because they aren't very successful. They aren't very strong people. Um, so you could really so there's a lot of this book that I felt a lot of people can resonate well and relate on conversation where I would feel taken back about certain experiences I would regret in the crowd of people I may try to fit in on a longer time basis, which is the difference in the term of a short term basis. I felt enlightened and had a sense that this book offered a sense of therapeutic towards lifestyles that are kind of interpreted and seen in a very excessive and regretful manner of behavior. The book puts into analogy that puts you into challenging certain aspects of understandings, which is how we remember stuff, which offers a lot of like implication where I feel it's kind of regretful in terms of like our identity and our sense of like being confident why we do things and feeling happy living with other people in other ways and integrating and choosing to stay away from other bad sources of communities. Uh, it's a great book in talking about the aspect of like how we put our emotions in lines of how we try to fit it in groups of peoples that we do not know. Uh, there also it puts in lines of maybe some strong implication of moral beliefs, and this is talking a lot in lines of like herd behavior. It comes in lines of like putting into implication of how us individuals who have defined ourselves and have very strong sense of confidence in ourselves. We measure a level of attractiveness to who we are and how we want and how we remember them in a sense that uh, challenges our way of thinking and emotional bias that is innate for us to feel protected. I mean, why we do stuff is in correlation to our ethics and our code of conduct. If we were all subtle people, just animals acting on a pure uh, response systems that are like biological innate, well, a lot of things wouldn't be made. A lot of things wouldn't progress, and then yet at the same time, we still do these things to kind of like bring onto opportunities from where we are. Are we going to revert back to an age towards where we are primal, where we are act mostly as intuitional caveman animals? What would be distinguishing us further on, right, from what we have in terms of advancements from our intelligence? So, there's certain aspects of this book that talks about clinical experience, and it comes in line with like managing and discovering and testing trials of certain drugs, which took a snippet of and took an enjoyment of reading in relation to where its mechanism and action came in lines of being able to like detect states of coma, since coma is a strong it's kind of like a life between death thing for like a lot of neurology things, brain activity being a good representation of how we see this person cohibits in our mind and our state of externalization in terms of representation of like our life, you know. There's a good amount of healthy reactions that I had when reading this book that I had to keep taking snippets. So like when we took react and watch to stuff like on shared on social media with our or like sharing gag websites, 9gag, Reddit, Tumblr. I represented it now in a good sense, these form of reactions on clips. Just to give you a good sense of like how much this book has stimulated me, and where I take a sense of like where you guys can take a deeper connection and attachment to reading, because like these thought processes are not necessarily, we share it in a very like short-term basis in our mind, but it's easily forgotten for its song. I wanted to take into corporations these aspects of where I read and have inspirational emotional reaction towards them and externalize it to other people. So I had to record it, because then otherwise I would have forgotten it just as easy as I've read it, right? But they are a way of me. They have a way stayed inside me, just like I am describing this in the sense that every time I am going for something in an automatic processing mode, because again, emotion is a faster reply to action compared to like thought process, and these comes in lines of like modeling in terms of the social groups or social behaviors that we want to fit in. These people, if you hang around people who are bring out the worst of and are very toxic, you eventually regress into that kind of state of mind in terms of behavior too, because these things are just like, I like to talk about it in terms of the Pavlov intake and Pavlov behavior, in terms of like we are all modeled into certain things from the environment that we choose to be and how we are developing as people, right? So yeah, there's some aspects of so I'm a healthy amount. So there's a lot of things that I felt like I reacted very healthily. And I think you guys should check out this book as well, The Lost and Founds and How Our Memory Tells About Ourselves. There's a lot of like intelligence, and you don't need a very strong educational background to take deep understanding of it. I had some of it, which kind of confers certain things that didn't make sense to me, but for the most of it, a lot of it is comprehensible without having to need to study and expose yourself in an environment where you have to go through a lot of different language and vocabulary to take understanding and meaning of what the author is trying to describe of it. If you wanted to have a go at it as well, it's okay, you know. But like this could have been much harder. But like it's not. It's challengeable. It's comprehensible. It's a decent read. If you have some neurology and medical background, all the better, right? But like it's not that kind of like language where they kind of like want to distinguish themselves for people who have kind of like stood out in terms of their effort in that field. It may not be too interesting to you as well, like, you know, anybody that's not in lines of having interest in this may just not come across too much and not come across enough literature to take deep understanding. It's kind of like when I'm trying to read something of a different field and I don't really quite get it. It's hard. It takes time for me to get it, like learning a different language, right? It's the best way of describing it. I if you've ever tried to learn a different language, the hustle barrier behind that is very similar. Like you'd have to like really go out of your way to practice every day. And yeah, I mean that's what I want to tell you. It's comprehensible enough to be consumed. So some aspects of biological reasoning is implied in certain notions of in our behavior in educational settings, but we still hold these innately. And if we do not identify with anything, then there's going to be a large sense of emptiness, and you're never going to be happy in that manner or in that way, right? But knowing you can adapt and fit in, I think is just another form of like greater in terms of skills, effort, and intelligence. If you want to, if constraining yourself into a small bubble is just showing a lot of like weakness in my opinion, whereas taking in parts of different areas in different communities in different environments and keeping solid and certain foundation without ever having to conform to a group herd and mentality on things you just do not feel bond well, because there's going to be controversies from different groups, right? They're going to say enforce one thing and you're going to enforce another, and these groups would normally not get along, but you've made yourself go into that community, so you now have to take a stance of wanting to understand what they're like and what's so. But like that's where you take a stance of like resisting. So you can cause issues and toxic natures of one place to another. I mean, it's for you to choose, you to pick your own battles, but like that's generally where I take a stance of like how this book kind of like phrases certain things that are very innate in terms of like representation in communities when we talk about stuff. And I honestly think everybody should have a go and just take it in correspondence. It makes sense as well. I mean, like resource guarding is something innate as well. We don't want to give everything to everyone. Really, these things should be earned. It's something I strongly enforce into people. You're not, no one owes you anything. Everyone wants something. So how do you distinguish it? Well, competition and games. That's where I take a stance of saying this seems like a fair representation in a world where a lot more is great than you think. But anyway, this is my kind of like thought process talking about a second attempt for making a podcast. I kind of like just summarize a lot of emotion and passage in lines of like how this book made me feel. But it's really something. These podcasts are not a summary of what I've read, but like give you a good understanding of like this book was a good read. A review, yeah, but not a summary. Not a summary for you to make the excuse of not reading it. You should read it yourself. And I had saved a lot of clips I wish to share. And like again, it's very engaging. And I take a stance that you should define something. Just challenge yourself to read something each at your own pace, and I record things, and that kept my motivation in. Like that kept my interest into engaging into this content. I recorded it on my phone and read passage where I had a reaction. Just kind of like when you're browsing 9gag or newsfeed and you're kind of bored. You just read it, take states of like stuff that took emotional states, and then this is great way of like kind of like really engaging in content and knowledge that is deeply explored for years of a specialty and make a deep appreciation of it. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.